Okay, no, you're gonna attack things and you can't be in here. Mister, I'm sorry. Do I have to put you in hallway jail? Oh, you're good. But oh no, I'm not better. You're actually better. Probably because you're like an apex predator who lives in my house. This is the culprit. I got him. Hey guys, it's Shaylin and I'm here today with another writing video. So today I'm doing my yearly wrap-up video. I do one of these every year. It's basically just like, it's exactly what it sounds like. I just kind of look at the past year, reflect on my goals, look at whether I met them, didn't meet them, talk about my goals for next year, talk about what I wrote, all of that fun stuff. Normally I do my yearly wrap-up videos in two parts. I do this video where I talk about my goals and make my goals for next year, and then I also do a what I learned about writing in year whatever video. I'm not doing one of those videos this year just because I can't think of enough points, which is bad. Like, did I not learn anything this year? I think this was a year of head empty, no thoughts. Ultimately, I think it's just the fact that 2021 was just 2020 part 2. You know, there were ultimately no changes in my life whatsoever, like at all. So I've just been in stasis. Didn't learn anything this year. Oopsie, it happens. So I'm going to start with the writing stats and just look at how much I wrote. This is something that I tally every year. Well, not every year. I started doing it like 2 years ago. And I started doing this just out of curiosity, to be honest. I don't have a goal for how many words I write in a year. It's really only something that I tally out of curiosity at the end of the year. And it's also definitely not an exact figure, especially because I'm just going based off of the word counts of my projects, where they are now compared to last year. And that doesn't account for all the things that I also cut. So this number is actually probably significantly higher than it is, but these are like the words we can account for, you know? So starting with novels, I only was actively drafting one novel, and it was a novel that I had started the previous year, and that was Holding a Ghost. So I wrote 40,065 words of Holding a Ghost this year, and I also did finish that draft. Part of the reason why my word count for the year is so low is because I was only actively working on drafting a novel, like writing the first draft of a novel, for around 3 months of the year. And then of my novel, Honey Vinegar, this is just a ballpark, basically. 5K, I'm gonna say. Last year, in my yearly wrap-up, I say that that book was exactly 95K. I've just finished doing an editing pass of it, and at its peak, it was 100K exactly. It's dipped back down to 95 again, because cut a lot of crap. I also wrote 8,084 words of my fantasy project, Where We Seek Dawn. This is a personal project that I'm just writing for funsies on the side for myself, basically. So I really only worked on that for a period of like 2 weeks, because it's kind of just like an in-between project that I pick up when I'm in between projects. And I wrote 8,181 words of my new novel, which is called Saltbirds. I haven't really talked about it. I wouldn't say that I've officially started drafting it yet, because I'm doing other things, but I've kind of just worked on it on the side a little because I couldn't contain myself and I've written the first 2 chapters. So once I'm done some of the projects that I'm working on, I'm going to start drafting that. I'm very excited about it. So that means that in total I wrote 56,335 words for the novels category in 2021. So for short stories, I also wrote significantly less short fiction than I have in the past few years. I wrote 3 stories and 1 flash fiction for a total of 14,744. And if we include the 1 story that I started and never finished, which I'm going to, because I'm scraping the bottom of the barrel for words here, then that would be 15,590 words of short stories. So definitely down from the past few years where I think I was writing more like 6 stories a year. I only wrote 3 and a flash. At first I was kind of like, what is happening? Because I wasn't getting ideas for short stories as often. This year I finished up a story right at the beginning of the year that I had just written the very beginnings of at the end of 2020. That story is called I Am a Wolf in Wolf's Clothing. And then right as I finished editing that, I wrote another story called Tabula Rasa, and then I didn't write a short story for a really long time. In the fall, I wrote a flash fiction piece called After Hours, and then in October, I also wrote another story called Kill Sand. I did a lot of editing short stories this year, but I didn't draft many new ones. I've actually been wanting to ease back off short stories for a long time and write fewer of them because I was getting a little overwhelmed how much time I needed to dedicate to editing them, and I was just like drowning in short stories. And so I've actually been saying for a long time that I wanted to write fewer short stories. I think leaving the year with only 4 stories is ultimately not a bad thing. Finally, for poetry, so I didn't talk about this in my yearly wrap-up video from last year, but in January, I had the bright idea that I wanted to write 1 poem a month in 2021. A few years ago, I had tried getting into poetry, and I had gone through a phase where I wrote poetry consistently, and that was in like 2019. And then I kind of slowed down. I only wrote a handful of poems in 2020, and so this year I was like, let's get back into poetry, and I was going to challenge myself by writing 1 poem a month. Do you know how many poems I wrote? 1. 214 words. For the year, that puts me at a total of 72,139 words. So I'll admit that I'm not thrilled with this number. You know, I think I'm struck by how much less it is than the past 2 years where I wrote between 110 and 120,000 words, right? It really stands out at how much lower this number is, and I look at it and I'm like, did I not write this year? Like, did I not do anything? I think the reasons this number are so low is because I spent so much of the year focused on editing, and specifically editing short stories. I also had a huge burnout that caused me to barely write anything between July and October. This wasn't related to writing. This was like an emotional burnout from other aspects of my life that translated to writing. I basically didn't have the energy to do anything. I wanted to write so badly, and I felt so tired that I couldn't focus on literally anything. And that didn't really fix itself until I cut back on how much I was working. I really didn't write at all July and August and September. Pretty much all of September I was away on a camping trip. Those 3 months I basically didn't write, and then I was slowly getting back into it in October. Word count is really not reflective of how much work you did. So I think the fact that this number is so low ultimately reflects the fact that I spent a lot of the year editing, which is a good thing. So I don't think that this number really means anything or is reflective of how much work I did. So let's move on to my publication wrap up. I published 3 stories this year. So the first story that I had published is called Zugzwang. So that story was first longlisted for the CBC prize, which is like the highlight of my year. Honestly, the highlight of my life. Like, that feels like the biggest accomplishment of my life. I still kind of can't believe that I was longlisted for the CBC prize. Like, I'm still wrapping my head around that one. And then after that story was longlisted, it was published in an online magazine called Plenitude. The story is linked in the description and also in my link tree with all my other stories. And then the next story that I had published is called Elise Holding a Deer Mouse, 1829, which is published in Carousel, which is also online and also free to read. And then the last story that I had published was published in Prism International in their Wonder themed issue, which is, I actually don't know the number, the most recent issue, and it's the one with a unicorn. And then I also do have a story that I believe is forthcoming in a magazine. I've been back and forth with a magazine for several months doing revisions. They haven't actually officially accepted the story yet, but they did tell me that it is almost there. So let's get into the main part of the video and talk about my goals for 2021 and whether or not I accomplished them. I only had 3 goals. I've actually never felt ashamed or embarrassed to come on here and admit that I didn't achieve my goals. Like, I know it's said a lot of the time, like, oh, you put your goals out online because then people will shame you if you don't do them, and that's the motivation. No one ever shames you if you don't meet your goals. It's at least not to me. It's never happened to me. I've never experienced that. Normally when I'm like, I didn't meet my goals, everyone in the comments is like, same. But this year I actually do feel kind of ashamed to admit that I didn't meet my goals, and I think it's because I felt that they were so reachable, and last year I remember being like, these goals are so reachable, they're so reasonable, I'm totally going to meet all of them, and I felt like 100% sure that I would meet all my goals. So my first goal was to finish editing Honey Vinegar. Honey Vinegar is my ongoing novel project that I finished the first draft of in 2020, and I've been revising it ever since. I really thought this year that I would finish editing it, and I didn't. The reason this didn't happen was literally just due to delays outside of my control. That happens. I will say that this is actually something that I'm working on right now, and I think it's not going to take that much longer. Like, I just finished a draft of it. Yeah, it didn't happen in 2021. My next goal was to finish the first draft of Holding a Ghost and do the developmental edit. I kind of half completed this. I did finish the first draft. I did not end up developmentally editing it. I do think that I did the most important part, which was the first draft. Like, I'm really, really happy that I finished the first draft, and I kind of knew that I would. There wasn't that much left. I didn't end up developmentally editing it, and I won't get into the whole thing. There was logic to that decision. Basically, it's related to the honey vinegar editing delays. I basically didn't want to start developmentally editing Holding a Ghost until I was done editing honey vinegar, just because I feel that editing a book is such a big, mentally consuming task. I didn't want to be alternating between them, doing a bit of one, a bit of the other. Like, I really just wanted to wait until honey vinegar was done and off my plate, and then I could move on to edit Holding a Ghost with, like, kind of like a clear plate. So I kind of didn't end up doing this just based on how my schedule wasn't working out, but looking back, I think that I probably could have done it, is the thing. If I'd just gotten over that and flipped around my schedule a little, like, I probably could have, but at the same time, I don't need to. Like, even if I had a developmentally edited draft of that, it wouldn't really change anything that's going on with my life. So there was no rush to do it, and so I decided to just wait and do it at the time that felt optimal for me, which was after honey vinegar, rather than rushing to do it just to meet this goal. Again, I will probably do these edits fairly soon. Like, it's going to be the thing that I do right after I edit honey vinegar, so I'll probably be doing this early in the year. But yeah, it just didn't happen last year. The last goal here was to edit Pareidolia. Pareidolia is my first short story collection. So my goal for this year was just to revise all of the stories, because I'd honestly been putting that off forever. And I did still continue to put it off forever because I didn't start this until November. Around October, I realized that I wasn't going to meet any of my yearly goals. And I was like, well, it's too late to start on Pareidolia. I started doing like a write every day challenge for NaNoWriMo. Halfway through the month, I was basically like, you know what? Let me just edit this book. Like, I'll just power through it. I can do this in 2 weeks. Basically, it was just out of the fact that I didn't want to not meet a single one of my yearly goals. I just wanted to feel like I did something that I set out to do. I basically edited that whole draft in like 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. And then the final goal for the year was just my reading challenge. I just set my reading challenge to 50 books, which I knew I was going to meet because I normally read way more than that. I actually read the most books I've ever read in a year with 83. What about my 2022 goals? So here's the thing. I don't have any. This is because the huge realization that I had this year regarding my goals was that what you are working on is going to depend so much on your life circumstances, which you can't predict. Even though I didn't go through any major life changes really at all this year, it was just a year of complete and utter stasis for me. There were still circumstances that hugely affected what I was writing. However, I expect 2022 to potentially be a year of huge change. And I think that setting yearly goals that will ultimately be hugely affected by big changes in my life is kind of just setting myself up to fail. I think this year I need to just roll with the punches, write what makes sense for me at the time. I think that due to my failures with goals this year, I'm leaving the year with just like a bad taste in my mouth. The thing is, this year, my year on paper looks like a failure. Like before I'd looked at all this stuff to make this video, I felt like my year of writing was a huge success. I felt like I'd done a lot. I was really proud of what I'd accomplished. I felt like I had written a lot, especially in the first half of the year. That was probably one of the most productive times of my life. So I felt like the year was really successful for me until I came on here and had to tally up my yearly goals, and now I feel really disappointed, I guess, in what I didn't accomplish this year. I guess I feel just very disappointed that I didn't meet my goals because they had seemed so realistic. Like, that's why I only set 3 of them. I feel like I'm coming out of this year kind of kicking myself for what I didn't do, rather than actually like congratulating myself for what I did do. I feel like I'm really viewing this year as barely wrote any short fiction, didn't meet my yearly goals, didn't produce a lot of new words. So it's not that I'm getting rid of goals forever or that I don't believe in yearly goals or anything. It's just that I don't think it makes sense for me to have them next year because it's going to be potentially a whirlwind of a year. A lot of things are up in the air in my life. A lot of things could change, but I don't really know what's going to happen. And they're all things that are deeply tied to my writing. So it just doesn't make sense for me to have yearly goals because I don't know what's going on basically with my life. I think this year there's lots that I want to do, but I'm not going to set official goals and I'm just going to let the chips fall where they may. I did want to take a second to talk about publication. I've been flirting with the publication of a book for a few years, and I feel like every year I have to come on here and say, I know I said this year I was going to query agents or whatever, and I didn't. And it always feels disappointing to have to be like, sorry I didn't do it. There are things in the works regarding me taking the next steps towards publishing a book. What those steps are, I'm not going to talk about. I've decided that I want to keep my journey with publishing a book private until there's something concrete to share. You know, there are inevitably going to be many failures along the way. That's what publishing a book is like. Things don't always pan out. You get rejected. That's life, and it's fine. I struggle with the expectations of people a lot and dealing with those. So when I fail at something, I'm fine with that personally. It the thing that's hard is feeling like I have to come on here and be like, admit that I failed, you know, and have it be a huge thing when it shouldn't be a huge thing. When something happens, I will tell you, I will talk about all the details, I will talk about all the failures along the way. But I've decided that until then, I'm not going to talk at all about my journey towards publishing a book. I'm not going to talk about what stage I'm at. I'm not going to talk about if I'm querying a book and who I'm querying and who's rejected me and who is my manuscript and all of this. Like, I'm just keeping it private because I just need this part of my life to be private. My main personal goal for this year is to be better at drawing boundaries on my platform, and this is a boundary that I've decided to draw. So things are happening. I'm not going to talk about what those things are, what books they may pertain to, because it might not pan out. There's nothing concrete, and that's fine. And if it does pan out, then I'll tell you everything. But if it doesn't, then I won't. So basically, one day, who knows when, a video from me will pop into your subscription feed called How I Got My Literary Agent or How I Got My Book Deal, and you'll be like, what? I didn't know that was happening. It'll just be out of nowhere. Finally, I want to end this video with just a little channel update. Like I just said, my main personal goal is to be better at setting boundaries on my platform. I'm not going to post a video a week like I have been. I'm really proud of myself for the fact that I was able to post a video once a week or more almost every week throughout 2021. That was, I think that took a lot of organization and print planning, and obviously there were a few times where I took breaks, but for the most part I did it. I'm really proud of myself for that. But like I talked about, I dealt with a really bad burnout throughout the middle of the year, and ever since I've kind of come out of that, I've had to be super, super careful with how I use my energy. Normally, in the past, it wasn't hard for me to have the energy to both write and make videos and do all the other stuff that I do. Recently, it has been hard. I've rarely had the energy to pick myself up and film or even to script videos. I'm just not going to post every week. I'm not going to say when I'm going on a break because I don't know. It's just going to happen when I have the time and energy, and when I don't, it's just not going to happen. Especially through January, I have a lot on my plate right now. So this might be the only video other than a recent reads that I'm currently editing. But other than that, you probably won't see me on here every week. Life is hectic sometimes, and I just need to use that energy for other things. And it is more important for me that I use that pretty limited energy for my writing and also for the stuff I have to do. So that's really all, just to say that you won't see me on here as much throughout the year. I have to really protect myself to keep myself from getting really burned out like happened last year because it was really bad. My question for this video isn't about your goals. I just want to know what your biggest accomplishment of 2021 was. It could just be something you wrote that you really liked. Really, it could be anything, like your favorite thing that you wrote or just what you feel like your biggest accomplishment was. Even if you think that thing is small, That's fine. Like, it could be, I wrote a poem that I liked. It could be, I wrote a line that I really liked. I don't really just anything. I would just like to hear about your favorite writing moment or favorite writing thing from 2021. So that's all for now. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in another video.